I drove 7 hours through a relentless rainstorm with my arthritic shoulder throbbing, a homemade red velvet cake balanced carefully on the passenger seat beside me. The weather forecast had warned against travel, but nothing was going to stop me from surprising my son Owen on his 30th birthday. Not the pain radiating down my arm, not the thunderstorm transforming the interstate into a treacherous river, not even the nagging voice in my head reminding me that our last phone call had been unusually brief. My Chevy sedan pushed through sheets of water that fell so hard the wipers could barely keep up. I had risen before dawn to bake Owen's favorite cake, carefully decorating it with cream cheese frosting and those little sugar designs he loved as a child. Each time I hit a pothole, I winced, both from the jolt to my shoulder and fear for my precious cargo. "You're out of your mind, Susan," my neighbor Denise had said when I mentioned my plan. We were standing between our driveways in suburban Phoenix, where I'd lived alone since Mark died 3 years ago. "The forecast looks terrible, and it's a long drive to Portland. Why not just call him instead?" But calling wouldn't be the same. Something had been off in our relationship lately. Owen's texts growing shorter, his calls less frequent. I attributed it to the stress of his new promotion at the architectural firm, the demands of his marriage to Allison. Still, a mother knows when something isn't right, and I was determined to bridge whatever gap had formed between us. The rain intensified as I crossed into Oregon, turning the world beyond my windshield into a blurry watercolor. I stopped at a roadside diner, massaging my shoulder while nursing a cup of mediocre coffee. The elderly waitress noticed my grimace. "Long drive ahead?" she asked, refilling my cup without waiting for an answer. "Almost there," I replied. "Visiting my son for his birthday." "He's lucky to have you," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Something in her expression made me wonder if she had children who didn't receive surprise visits anymore. Back on the road, memories kept me company. Owen learning to ride his bike, his college graduation, walking him down the aisle after Mark passed. The moments that defined our relationship, or so I thought. The GPS announced I was only 30 minutes away as the rain finally began to ease, sunlight breaking through clouds like an omen. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, applied fresh lipstick, and practiced my surprise face. I hadn't told Owen I was coming. Hadn't mentioned it during our last conversation when he'd seemed distracted and eager to end the call. This would fix everything, I thought. Some quality time together just like old times. I had no idea what awaited me at the end of this journey. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time I pulled into the driveway of Owen and Allison's craftsman-style home in the suburbs of Portland. Their house, which I had helped them buy with a generous down payment, sat nestled among towering pines, its dark green exterior blending seamlessly with the Pacific Northwest landscape. I checked the time, 4:30 p.m. Perfect timing for the intimate birthday dinner Owen had mentioned to his sister last week. I carefully lifted the cake carrier from the passenger seat, wincing as my shoulder protested the movement. 7 hours of driving had left me stiff and damp, but excitement pushed the discomfort aside. I pictured Owen's face lighting up when he saw me, his mom, braving the elements to celebrate his special day. The front door was unlocked. They must be expecting guests, I thought. I stepped into the entryway, intending to call out a cheerful surprise, but hesitated when I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Something in their tone made me pause, water dripping from my raincoat onto their polished hardwood floors. "Mom called again this morning." Owen's voice carried clearly down the hallway. "Third time this week. What did she want this time?" Allison's response was tinged with barely concealed annoyance. I froze, cake box growing heavy in my arms. "Same as always, to talk about nothing for an hour," Owen continued, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "To remind me she's alone, to make me feel guilty for living my own life." My heart stuttered in my chest. I stood perfectly still, unable to process what I was hearing. "At least she didn't invite herself for your birthday," Vanessa said with a laugh. "Remember Thanksgiving? She stayed for 5 days." "Don't remind me," Owen groaned. "I had to hide in our bedroom just to get some peace." Each word landed like a physical blow. I could picture them perfectly. Owen chopping vegetables at the island, Vanessa stirring something on the stove, their domestic harmony uninterrupted by the inconvenient mother dripping rain onto their floor. God, I wish she would just give us some space, Owen continued, oblivious to my presence. Maybe if she found some friends her own age, a hobby, anything besides calling me constantly. Or a boyfriend, Vanessa suggested with a snicker. Then she'd be someone else's problem. Could you imagine? Owen laughed, and the sound, so familiar yet so foreign in this context, shattered something inside me. I should have left then. Should have retreated to my car with my dignity intact. But my feet remained rooted to the spot, my body unable to process the command to retreat. I told her we were too busy with work when she mentioned visiting, Owen added. Good call. The last thing we need is her showing up unannounced, Vanessa agreed. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so devastating. The cake box trembled in my hands as their conversation continued, each casual word deepening the wound. I don't remember deciding to move forward. My body simply carried me down the hallway and into their spacious kitchen with its gleaming stainless steel appliances and marble countertops that I'd helped them select. Owen stood at the cutting board, knife poised over a red bell pepper. Vanessa stirred something in a Dutch oven, the birthday dinner they were preparing for guests who weren't me. Their faces when they saw me made time stand still, shock draining the color from their cheeks, mouths forming perfect circles of horror. I could see the calculations racing behind Owen's eyes as he tried to determine how much I'd heard, what damage control would be required. Allison's hand rose to her throat in that gesture I recognized. Something she'd picked up from me during the years I'd thought we were growing closer. I didn't speak. Couldn't form words past the tightness in my throat. I simply placed the cake box on their island countertop, turned, and walked back through the door I'd entered. Mom! Owen called after me, his voice cracking with panic. Mom, wait! But I was already on the porch, rain mixing with the tears on my face. Susan, please. Vanessa joined the chorus. We didn't mean. I closed my car door on their excuses, started the engine with hands that had stopped shaking. Strange how clarity can arrive in the moment everything falls apart. Through my rain-streaked windshield, I could see them standing in the driveway. Owen with his hand extended, Vanessa half hidden behind him. They looked small somehow, diminished by what had just happened. I drove away without looking back. The rain returned with a vengeance as I reached the main road, as if nature itself were providing cover for my retreat. My clothes clung to my skin, cold and uncomfortable, but the physical discomfort seemed distant compared to the hollowness expanding in my chest. My phone began to buzz in my purse, repeatedly, insistently. I knew without looking that it was Owen, frantically trying to repair what couldn't be fixed. I switched it to silent and kept driving. Where does one go when the foundation of what you believe to be true crumbles beneath you? When the relationship you've nurtured reveals itself as an obligation. When the love you thought was mutual proves conditional. I drove aimlessly until the low fuel light illuminated my dashboard. The Comfort Inn appeared through the rain like a lighthouse, its vacancy sign flickering in invitation. Inside room 118, with its floral bedspread and generic landscape paintings, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. This wasn't just about cruel comments made in an unguarded moment. This was the culmination of years of subtle dismissals, increasingly transparent excuses, a relationship that had been withering while I continued to water it with hope and self-deception. My son had not simply rejected my surprise visit. He had rejected my place in his life. The motel bathroom's fluorescent lighting was merciless, highlighting every line on my face, the dark circles under my eyes, the slump of defeat in my shoulders. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Where was the confident marketing executive who had raised a child alone after his father walked out? The woman who had built a comfortable life through determination and grit. I showered mechanically and changed into the spare clothes from my overnight bag. My phone had finally stopped buzzing around midnight. 27 missed calls. 42 text messages. Owen, Mom, please call us back. You misunderstood. Owen, we were just venting. It wasn't about you. Allison, Susan, please let us explain. Oh, Mom, I'm worried. Where are you? Owen, this isn't fair. You're scaring me. Allison, at least let us know you're safe. Owen, if you don't call back, I'm going to call the police. The last was an empty threat. Owen wouldn't risk explaining to authorities why his middle-aged mother had fled his house in tears. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and considered my options. I could pretend it never happened, go back to our carefully choreographed relationship of brief calls and obligatory holiday visits. I could confront them, demand apologies that would never be sincere. Or I could do something entirely different. This wasn't the first disappointment. There had been smaller betrayals I'd ignored over the years. The Christmas they claimed they couldn't afford flights home, then posted Instagram photos from Aspen. The weekend visit when my toiletries were moved from the guest bathroom to a closet before their friends arrived. The wedding gift I'd sent to Allison's niece that received a thank you card addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, as if from strangers. Moments I'd dismissed as oversights now formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. I made coffee from the complimentary packet in the room and sat by the window, watching rain continue to fall. I pulled out my phone again, bypassing Owen's messages to call my friend Patricia back in Phoenix. Susan, thank God, she answered immediately. Owen's been calling me since yesterday. What happened? I told her everything. The drive, the overheard conversation, the quiet placement of the cake on the counter. I heard my son say he wishes I would just give him space, Pat, I concluded, my voice surprisingly steady. And his wife laughed and suggested I find a boyfriend so I'd be someone else's problem. Patricia's silence spoke volumes. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with controlled anger. Where are you now? Some motel in Oregon. I'll drive back tomorrow. Good. Come straight to my house when you get home. The guest room is ready, and I've still got that bottle of Cabernet we've been saving. For the first time since walking into Owen's kitchen, I felt a smile tug at my lips. Not happiness, it was too soon for that, but recognition of a truth I'd overlooked. I might have lost my illusions about my relationship with my son, but I wasn't alone. I'll be there in a few days, I said, feeling something like determination stir beneath the hurt. Keep the wine breathing. 3 days after the disastrous birthday visit, I sat in the office of Amelia Goldstein, the financial advisor I'd consulted occasionally since my divorce 15 years earlier. Her downtown Phoenix office offered views of Camelback Mountain, a vista that had always given me a sense of stability. Today I barely noticed it. I want to know exactly what financial connections exist between Owen and me, I said after declining coffee. Everything. Amelia raised an eyebrow but didn't question my sudden interest. After 30 minutes of database searches and account reviews, the picture became disturbingly clear. 2 credit cards with $50,000 limits, guaranteed by me. A personal loan for $25,000 taken out 3 years ago, right after they'd renovated their kitchen with their savings. Co-signed student loans I'd forgotten about. A home equity line of credit on their house that somehow listed me as secondary guarantor. Something I had no recollection of agreeing to. When were these arrangements made? I asked, voice steady despite my shaking hands. The oldest credit account was opened 6 years ago. The most recent, the home equity line, was just 4 months ago, right around the time Owen had called complaining about Allison's business struggling and how stressed they were about money. When I'd offered to help, he'd refused. We don't need charity, Mom, just some moral support. What he'd meant was that my signature was more valuable than my sympathy. After leaving Amelia's office, I drove to Wells Fargo and sat with a personal banker who helped me draft letters removing my guarantees from Owen and Allison's credit accounts. I closed joint accounts I'd forgotten existed and opened new ones solely in my name. This will affect their credit limits significantly, the banker warned. Possibly reduce them to 0 given their income-to-debt ratio. I understand, I replied, signing another form with steady hands. My next stop was the law office of Eleanor Reynolds, my college roommate who had specialized in estate planning for 30 years. I want to change my will, I said simply after her secretary had shown me in. Eleanor's office featured desert views and furniture too uncomfortable for lingering. At 62, she still colored her hair platinum blonde and wore reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain. "You look different," she said instead of hello. "I am different." She nodded once, gestured to a chair. "Tell me." I recounted everything from the 7-hour drive to the financial discoveries. Eleanor took notes without interrupting, her expression unchanging even at the most painful details. "And now?" she asked when I finished. "I want to change everything. And I need advice on removing my financial support without exposing myself to liability." Eleanor's smile was brief but genuine. "I've been waiting for you to stand up for yourself since Owen's wedding. Let's start with the will." For 2 hours we reconstructed my estate plan. My house in Phoenix, my investment portfolio, and all financial assets would go to the Women's Resource Center where I'd volunteered after my divorce. My personal items would be distributed among friends with specific bequests for Patricia and others who'd shown genuine care. "And for Owen?" Eleanor asked, pen poised. Thought carefully. "My recipe box and my journals. So he can read about the mother he dismissed and the life he didn't value." Eleanor made a note. "Deliciously petty. I approve." That evening, as sunset painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, I sat on Patricia's guest house patio with a glass of wine. For the first time since overhearing those devastating words in Owen's kitchen, I felt neither numb nor broken, but something else entirely. Free. The financial consequences began almost immediately. My phone erupted with notifications 3 days after I returned to Phoenix. Calls from unknown numbers I suspected were Owen trying different phones to reach me. Finally, I answered one. "What have you done?" His voice was tight with panic rather than concern. "Hello, Owen. I'm well, thank you for asking. The bank called about all our credit cards, saying they're being restructured because you've removed your guarantee. The mortgage company too. What's going on?" "Yes, I've made some changes to my financial arrangements." "Changes? Mom, we can't access our equity line anymore. And the credit cards. Interesting that you never mentioned I was guaranteeing those accounts. Or that you've been using my credit history to secure loans I knew nothing about." "It was a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Look, we need to talk about this. Whatever you think you heard that day. I know exactly what I heard, and what I've learned since makes it clear it wasn't a momentary lapse but a pattern of behavior. Mom, please. No more Owen. No more manipulations, no more guarantees. No more financing a life that excludes me except when my credit score is needed." I hung up and blocked his number. The letters arrived next, thick cream stationery with Owen's precise handwriting. Each one less about reconciliation and more about financial urgency. "Dear Mom, I don't understand what's happening. You won't answer our calls. The bank says our credit limit has been reduced because you're no longer serving as our guarantor. Whatever you think you heard that day, you misunderstood. We were just having a bad day after a stressful week. You know how Vanessa and I talk sometimes. Please call us. We're worried about you. Love, Owen." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just gaslighting wrapped in concern. Financial panic disguised as filial worry. 2 weeks after returning to Phoenix, I received a call from Owen's best friend since college, Michael. "Owen's worried sick about you, Susan," he said after I agreed to meet him for coffee. "He says you misunderstood something and now you're punishing him." Smiled. "Did he tell you what I misunderstood?" "He said you overheard a private conversation and took it the wrong way. I heard my son imply that I was a burden he wished would give him space, and his wife suggest I should become someone else's problem. Tell me, Michael, how should I have taken that?" His eyes widened. "He didn't say." "He did. And did he also tell you they've been using me as a credit guarantor for years without my knowledge? That they've leveraged my financial stability while telling me they couldn't afford to visit for my birthday?" Michael's silence was answer enough. Spring began to touch the desert with wildflowers as I rebuilt my life. I rejoined the marketing consultation firm I'd left when Owen suggested it took too much of my time. I signed up for painting classes at the community center and began volunteering at the Women's Resource Center 3 afternoons a week. Many clients were roughly Owen's age. Women rebuilding after relationships that had diminished rather than enhanced their lives. I helped with resumes and interview skills, sometimes just listened as they processed how they'd found themselves in situations they'd never imagined. "You don't seem like most of the older volunteers," one young woman told me as we worked on her job application. "You get it. How someone can love you and hurt you at the same time." "I've had some experience with that," I replied. Through Patricia's careful information gathering, I learned that Owen and Vanessa had been forced to downsize to a smaller house. Owen had taken on consulting work in addition to his architecture job. Vanessa had started selling real estate, something she'd once dismissed as beneath her business degree. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but I recognized their necessity. For too long, I had protected them from the natural consequences of their choices. Now reality was providing what my love had prevented: the chance to grow through adversity. In late summer, as monsoon storms brought brief, violent relief to the desert heat, I received a text from an unknown number. "Mom, please. Vanessa's pregnant. We're going to lose the house. All our savings gone. Is that what you want?" I didn't respond, but the message clarified something important. Even now, after everything, Owen's concern was for material things, not our relationship. Not once in any communication had he genuinely addressed the cruel words I'd overheard, except to dismiss them as jokes I'd misunderstood. 4 months after that rainy drive to Portland, I hosted a dinner party in my newly redecorated home. Not the extravagant gathering Owen had always pushed for. "You should hire a caterer, Mom, make it special," but something genuinely reflective of who I was becoming. Patricia was there with her famous enchiladas. Eleanor came, her platinum bob gleaming under the patio lights. My painting instructor, my hiking group, women I'd befriended at the resource center. People who had been relegated to the periphery of my life while I centered those who valued me least. We ate red velvet cake. Not the recipe I'd left on Owen's counter, but a new one I'd created with a hint of orange and dark chocolate ganache instead of cream cheese frosting. I served it on my good china, the set I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed important enough to warrant their use. Eleanor raised her glass as the evening light turned golden across my desert garden. "To Susan, who at 45 has more courage than most people half her age. To new beginnings," Patricia added. "And to knowing your own worth," my painting instructor concluded. I looked around at these faces, some known for decades, others more recent additions to my life, and felt something expand in my chest. This was connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation, friendship rather than guilt. The text still came from Owen, less frequent now but no less calculating. "Mom, the baby is due in January. Don't you want to be part of your grandchild's life?" I didn't respond. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I submitted my landscape painting to a local gallery show. I signed up for a weekend hiking retreat in Sedona. I planned a Christmas trip to New York with Patricia, something I'd always wanted to do but had postponed for Owen's increasingly rare holiday visits. 2 weeks before Christmas, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Owen standing on my porch, looking thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes. "Mom," he said simply. I didn't invite him in immediately. "Owen, can we talk?" He gestured to the porch swing where he'd spent so many teenage afternoons doing homework. We sat in silence for a moment, the desert evening settling around us. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said finally. "At first it was just to deal with the stress of everything that happened after you changed the financial arrangements. But it's become more than that." I waited, allowing him space to continue. "She asked me questions no one's ever asked, about why I resented your calls, why I felt such obligation rather than connection, why I could say such hurtful things about someone who had only shown me love." Owen looked up, meeting my eyes. I didn't have good answers. "And now?" I asked softly. "Now I'm beginning to understand that I've been punishing you for years. For being alone after Dad left. For needing me when I wanted independence. For representing a simpler life when I was trying so hard to build something impressive. His voice broke. For loving me unconditionally when I couldn't love myself that way. It wasn't a complete reckoning, such things take years, not months, but it was a beginning, a seed breaking through hard ground. The financial stuff, he continued. Losing the credit lines, downsizing, it's been hard. Really hard. But my therapist says. He gave a small, watery laugh. She says it's the best thing that could have happened to us. That we were building a life on appearances rather than authentic connection. And what do you think? Yes. I think she's right. And I think you knew that all along. Owen reached for my hand tentatively. I'm not asking for money, Mom. Or guarantees. Or anything material. He swallowed hard. I'd like to try again. To build something real between us before the baby comes. I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. I'd like that too. We didn't solve everything that evening on the porch swing. Real healing isn't a moment but a process, full of setbacks and small victories. In the months that followed, we established new patterns. Weekly video calls where financial matters were explicitly off limits, occasional family dinners where conversation went deeper than surface pleasantries. Vanessa struggled more with the new arrangement. Her charm had always been conditional, depreciating rapidly when it couldn't be exchanged for material benefit. But she was trying, if only for Owen's sake and the child they were expecting. As for me, I maintained the life I'd built during our estrangement. The Women's Resource Center remained in my will, though I added a trust for my grandchild's education. My friendships deepened, my painting improved, my consulting business thrived. Some might call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as consequences. At 45, I finally learned that love without respect isn't love at all, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop pretending. The rain falls differently now, not as a storm to be weathered, but as a reminder that even the hardest downpours eventually clear, leaving the world washed clean and ready for whatever comes next. This morning, my phone lit up with a message from Owen, an ultrasound image, a tiny profile in black and white, with a simple text. Your granddaughter. She has your smile. I touched the screen gently. This window into a future I hadn't been sure I'd want to see. Then I returned to preparing for my painting class, creating something that had never existed before. Much like the life I was building. One honest conversation, one boundary, one choice at a time.